Hey, what's up? It's Brock and welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about HTML or Hypertext Markup Language. Now, if you've been following the Full Stack Web Developer Bootcamp series here on the channel, we've already kind of briefly talked about HTML and what it is, so let's quickly do a recap. So far we know that HTML is a markup language. It is not a programming language or a coding language. It is used for rich text markup inside of our web browsers. We also know that it is the bread and butter of your web page. It is what provides it with structure through elements like title, header, paragraph, footer, navigation, and other things. So now let's talk about HTML structure. The structure of HTML is made up of elements, and these elements are created by writing tags, usually with an opening and a closing tag, wrapping the contents of that element. And it looks something like this, where you have the tag to open in the beginning, and then there's some content, whatever you want to put in there, and then there is a closing tag that it has a / to begin with. When writing HTML, we pick from a standard set of elements that all of our browsers can recognize. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't create your own HTML elements per se. If you wanted to, you could create a dog HTML element to represent your dog if you wanted to. But your browser's not going to know what to do with that element because it's not in the standard set of HTML elements that we use as web developers. So now let's give it a try ourselves and create our very first HTML page. To get started, we're going to need two things: some sort of a text editor and some sort of a web browser. You can use Visual Studio Code, which is what I'm going to be using. You can use Sublime Text. You can use the Notepad app on your PC or Mac or whatever you're using. You can use Notepad++. It doesn't matter for this example. All you need is to be able to write some text. The next thing you need is any web browser. I'm going to use Firefox. You can use Chrome. You can use Safari. You can use whatever you have and feel comfortable with. Okay, so here we are. I've got my code editor, which again is Visual Studio Code on the left, and I have my web browser, which is Firefox on the right. Now, to begin with, we need to first create a new document. I can do that by hitting Control-N or going to File and hitting New Text Document. I'm going to go ahead and set the language here to HTML, and then now my code editor knows that I'm working with an HTML document. Then we want to just save this. I'll hit Control-S, and then I will navigate to where I want to save it, and I will call this Memphis.html because we're going to create a web page about the city that we live in. I live in Memphis, so I'm going to call mine Memphis. You can follow along and also do yours on Memphis, or you can do it in about whatever city you live in. So I'm going to hit save, and then now we have Memphis.html open here in the code editor. And I'll take it one step further, and I will then grab that document from wherever I saved it, and I will drag it over and open it in my web browser. So now you can see we've got the file name, and it goes and it ends in Memphis.html. And so if I wanted to, I could just type hello world. I could save that, and then I could refresh, and you'll see that reflected in the web browser here. I'll make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it on the recording. Okay, so now let's actually create an HTML document. Now I have a snippet here that I can use through VS Code and Emmet for an HTML5 document. So I'll hit enter there, and that will give me the boilerplate for an HTML document. So now let's talk about what each one of these tags and elements means. So the first thing you see here on line 1 is doc type HTML. You'll also know that this is a little bit different than the structure of tags that we talked about before, and there's also not a closing tag anywhere below it. That's because this is a required preamble found at the top of all HTML documents that essentially tells our browser that we're working with an HTML document, and it tells the browser to give its best effort attempt at following all the relevant specifications of how to render an HTML document rather than just using some incompatible specification that will cause it to kind of render in a quirky or funny way that we don't intend it to. The next thing you see here is the HTML tag, which is the root element of every HTML document. The lang is an attribute to tell what language the document is. It's set to English. You don't really need to worry about this right now. The next thing you're going to see here is head. And I think if I hover over this, it'll kind of tell you, yeah, the head element represents a collection of metadata for the document. So metadata is things that aren't rendered out on the page, right? So you can see there's a couple of meta tags here, and none of this information appears anywhere over here on the page itself. That's because these are all meaningful to the browser, and if you're using VS Code, you can kind of hover over these and it'll tell you what they mean, but you don't really need to know that right now. You just need to know that the meta tag contains meta information that is meant for the browser. It's not meant for you or anyone else using your website. Next is the body tag, and this represents the content of the document. So the body is where all of your elements are going to go that actually get rendered onto the page. And then if I actually save this and refresh and make that go away, I kind of skipped over it, but we'll talk about it. The title is the actual title of the document or the page. It defines the text that is shown in the browser's title bar on the Pages tab. And it can only contain text. There are no tags within the title tag. You can't nest tags here. So if I change this to say Memphis, Tennessee, then I refresh, you can see up here on the tab, it now says Memphis, Tennessee. That wraps up this video. I hope that you found it interesting and helpful. If you have any questions about the basics of HTML, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. I read all of my comments, so I will get back to you and do my best to answer. If you don't have any questions, feel free to just leave an emoji or your favorite letter or your name down in the comment section just to boost this video's engagement a little bit. It's always free and it helps me out. Also, hit the like button if you haven't already. If you're interested in becoming a full stack web developer completely for free, check out the playlist on my channel. If you want access to bonus videos, coding exercises, and access to the private Discord community, check out my Patreon link down in the description below. Like I said, in the next video, we're going to take a deeper dive into HTML elements and start building out an actual web page. Thank you for watching, and as always, happy coding.